I've been with my wife for 14 years. We dated for 3 years before we got married. So if I count that, it's 17 years together. Despite nearly 2 decades together, she betrayed me. It all started because of my parents, who scammed me out of almost $90,000, my life savings. I own a chain of restaurants with some friends from business school. It's a moderately successful business, and we make decent money. I have been saving up to start my own side business and expand. However, last month my parents, aged 64 and 63, told me they were in financial trouble. They needed my help to bail them out, or they could lose their home and all their property. They explained that before I was born, my dad's uncle lent them money because my mom had to quit her job when she was pregnant with me. They borrowed more money over the years and couldn't pay it back. When the uncle passed away, his son inherited the debt and threatened legal action. My parents claimed they gave him everything they had but needed $90,000 more to settle the debt. They said they'd already used up their retirement savings and were desperate not to lose their home. I foolishly trusted them and gave them the money, hoping to prevent their suffering. I suggested discussing options with the creditors, but they insisted it was too risky. I trusted my parents and made the mistake of giving them the money under the table, which turned out to be a big mistake. A week after I sent them the money, I realized my parents had blocked me everywhere and disappeared. They sold their house shortly after receiving the money and left without telling anyone. Their neighbors informed me about it. I waited every day for them to return, but they never did. After about 2 weeks, I accepted that my parents had scammed me and I lost all my savings. It was a tough time for me. My wife kept reassuring me that things would be okay and that I could earn the money back with time. However, it took me almost 15 years to save $90,000, and I couldn't imagine working another 15 years to recover what I lost. I tried working with my lawyer, but it was challenging because I didn't know where my parents were. Just when I was about to give up, I received an email from my parents about 2 weeks ago. They apologized, saying they had to lie and scam me because of a gambling debt. They feared I'd be upset if I knew about my dad's gambling problem. So they made up a story to manipulate me into giving them money. They admitted using the money to pay off debts and selling the house to move away, assuming I wouldn't want to be around them if I knew the truth. They expressed deep regret and hoped for my forgiveness. After reading the email, all I felt was intense anger, and I immediately forwarded it to my lawyer to pursue legal action against my parents. However, when I shared this with my wife, she disagreed and didn't think it was right to go after them because they had been through a lot already. I couldn't understand why she was taking their side when they had essentially stolen money from me, and we now had proof of their wrongdoing that we could use to recover the funds. I believed it was worth the effort, considering how hard I had worked to save that money over the years. We argued about it, and she accused me of being heartless because these were my parents who had made a tiny mistake. She tried to explain that addiction, like gambling, could be out of control, and my father might have lost control like an addict does. She suggested I show more compassion and understanding towards them instead of focusing solely on the money. She believed that they resorted to scamming me because they didn't feel safe or comfortable enough to ask for help directly. When I pointed out that they could have just been honest with me from the beginning instead of deceiving me, she blamed me for not creating a safe environment for them to open up. She said my strict demeanor made them afraid to be truthful with me. The conversation with my wife was incredibly frustrating because she kept making me feel like I was to blame and absolved my parents of any responsibility. She was manipulative and made me doubt myself so much that I told my lawyer to pause everything with the legal proceedings. After arguing with my wife, I started questioning my relationship with my parents. She made me feel like I was the villain in this situation, despite being the one who got scammed. Her gaslighting was so effective that I began to wonder if I had been too harsh on people in general. I already had a reputation for being tough at work, so I started thinking maybe I could have treated my parents better and they would have been honest with me. I almost convinced myself that I shouldn't pursue the money and that my focus on savings was making me materialistic. My wife made it seem like I cared more about money than my parents' well-being. We didn't talk for a couple of days, but I couldn't stop thinking about our argument and rereading my parents' email. I was confused and unsure of what to do next. My lawyer kept urging me to proceed with the lawsuit, but I hesitated because I didn't want to lose my wife, especially since I already felt like I had lost my parents. I was about to apologize to my wife when I accidentally saw a text on her phone from my mother, and it changed everything for me. I had taken a day off from work and was feeling down when I noticed my wife had left her phone at home. Curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to snoop through her phone to see if she had been discussing our arguments with her friends. I knew her password, so it wasn't hard to access her messages. To my shock, I discovered that my wife, whom I've been married to for almost 2 decades, was colluding with my parents. She had been in communication with them ever since they sent the apology email. My mother had texted her, asking if she convinced me to drop the lawsuit. If I sued, my parents warned her that their deal would be off. As I scrolled through the messages, I realized this had been going on for a while. My wife had threatened my parents with involving the police to trace them down if they didn't return the money they scanned from me. However, my parents offered her half of the money they received from selling their house and other properties to keep quiet and dissuade me from suing them. It was clear they had enough money to pay off their gambling debts, but chose to scam me instead. My wife agreed to their deal and was trying to convince me to drop the lawsuit. She had already received half of the money for her efforts and was set to receive the rest in a couple of months. As I went through the conversation and realized the extent of the betrayal, my heart broke. Despite feeling devastated, I focused on gathering evidence. I took screenshots of the messages and emailed them to myself. I'd also recorded a video of the conversation to ensure I had solid proof. Knowing my wife would return home soon, I quickly packed a few things and left. I drove to a hotel outside of town, keeping my phone off to avoid her attempts to contact me. I wanted her to discover the truth when she saw the messages I left on her phone. Once settled in the hotel, I turned my phone back on, ignoring my wife's texts, and immediately contacted my lawyer. I shared all the evidence needed to sue both my parents and my wife for the money they had deceived me into giving. I decided to file for divorce as well. I couldn't see a way to rebuild trust after such deception. My wife kept texting apologies, claiming she did it all for us and promising to explain everything later. She insisted she was on my side and planned to use the money for our future. However, I couldn't believe her excuses. It seemed clear she was driven by greed and had manipulated me into forgiving my parents. Even if she had good intentions with the money, her methods were deceitful and hurtful. The betrayal of trust was too deep. Even if she explained herself, I doubted I could ever trust her again. Divorce seemed like the only option left. So my lawyer and I went ahead with filing the legal petitions against my parents and my wife. They were officially served with the legal papers a couple of days ago. It was tricky for my lawyer to find my parents, and we had to hire someone professional to locate them. Eventually, we managed to serve them in person, which was what I wanted. After they were served, I didn't hear anything from my parents, but my wife has been reacting strongly. She's been messaging me nonstop since she got served with both the divorce papers and the lawsuit. I can tell she's desperate and keeps asking me to reconsider the divorce. She says she made a mistake and wants to make things right, but I'm feeling torn. I know I'm hurting her, and it's tough to deal with her constant texts and pleas. We've been together for 17 years, and she kept telling me she was acting for our benefit. I'm just really confused about what to do. I feel like I have no choice but to proceed with the divorce, especially because I believe she manipulated me into forgiving my parents. Update 1. It's been 3 weeks since I filed the legal petitions, and during that time, I decided to block my wife because I felt like I had nothing more to say to her. She kept trying to reach out and convince me to come back for about a week before I finally blocked her. Part of my decision came from the advice I received here. Many people pointed out that my wife's actions were a huge red flag. I realized that my love for her had clouded my judgment. Deep down, I wanted to believe she would never betray me like this, but I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. She manipulated and betrayed me, and I doubt she would have ever come clean on her own. After such a deep betrayal, I don't think I could ever trust her again, no matter how much I loved her. Blocking her was actually a relief, and it helped clear my head. The legal proceedings against my parents and my wife are moving forward, and things are looking positive for me. I'm confident I'll get my money back. My parents are facing the consequences of their lies, and my lawyer and I are determined to hold them accountable. They already seem unhappy about the situation. On the day of our first settlement negotiation, my goal was to ensure my parents looked and felt as unhappy as I did when they scammed me. My wife also tried to talk to me that day, which was difficult, but I managed to avoid her and return to the hotel without interacting. Now, my plan is to continue avoiding her until all of this is over. It's going to be challenging, but I'm determined not to speak to my wife under any circumstances. I'm afraid that talking to her might weaken my resolve, and I can't risk going back to her. I know she can manipulate me, as she almost did before. I have very little self-control when it comes to her, so it's safest for me to avoid any contact. Dealing with her legally is already tough enough for me. I can't handle more than that. So my focus right now is on avoiding her as much as possible until everything is resolved. Update 2. Today, my wife unexpectedly showed up at the hotel where I've been staying. I was surprised when the hotel front desk called me to let me know she was there. I hadn't told anyone besides my lawyer and a couple of trusted friends where I was, and I knew they wouldn't have shared my location with her. When I spoke to her, she explained that she had been searching all the hotels in town for the past few days to find me. Now that she had located me, she insisted on having a conversation. Feeling unsure of what to do, I invited her up to my room because I didn't want to argue in the lobby. Once in the room, we sat in awkward silence until she finally spoke up. She asked me to stop the divorce proceedings, which caught me off guard. I couldn't believe she was bringing this up again. I firmly told her it was already bad enough that she showed up uninvited and that she shouldn't make things worse by pressuring me. She then tried to convince me by saying she would testify against my parents to make things easier for me if I stayed with her. I explained to her that this wasn't how things worked. She couldn't just turn against my parents and expect me to take her back. Our relationship was beyond repair, and I had already made it clear that I wanted to leave. She couldn't accept that our marriage was ending. I tried explaining that I was fighting to end it, not fix it. She started crying and asked why I was punishing her when she had learned her lesson. Her reaction seemed absurd to me. I chuckled because she made it sound like I was a strict teacher, not her betrayed husband. I clarified that I wasn't punishing her. I was protecting myself. Staying away from her was what I needed for my own well-being. Despite my explanation, she kept crying and insisted she was acting for our benefit. She didn't want to throw away over a decade of her life for a mistake. I felt miserable too, but I couldn't trust her anymore. I needed her to understand this. I gently explained that I couldn't be with her, even though I loved her, because she had hurt me and broken my trust. Once trust is broken, it can't easily be repaired. Staying together would only lead to doubt and misery for both of us. Continuing the marriage wouldn't make sense because I would always doubt her sincerity. It was in both our best interests to go through with the divorce, as staying together would only make us both unhappy. Instead of trying to accept it, I thought I was making progress with her until she stood up and told me I was wrong. She said she loved me and wasn't ready to give up on our marriage because of a misunderstanding. Then she walked out. Now, I've been sitting here for the past hour wondering what to do. It's really frustrating because this could be a straightforward divorce, but she's making it much more difficult. I told my lawyer about it, but there's not much we can do if she doesn't want to get divorced. It's really frustrating, but I feel stuck and can't do anything about it. Just wanted to give you all an update on the legal process. It's still ongoing, but I'm definitely winning. My parents are just trying to buy themselves more time, and my wife is still fighting against the divorce, even though it's been almost 2 months since the proceedings began. I feel sorry for her at this point because she's clearly in denial about the situation. Her family isn't speaking to her either, presumably because they found out the truth. It must be tough for her. But I want to clarify that it's not my fault. Update 4. It's been almost 4 months since my original post, and today my parents and wife were finally ordered to return all the money to me. Despite knowing they were likely to lose, they and their lawyers fought hard. It was incredibly satisfying to see their reactions when they realized they had lost. Regarding my wife, we're definitely getting divorced now, regardless of whether she agrees. The legal process is just a formality. Mentally, I've already moved on. I've left the hotel and moved into my own apartment. We're still sorting out who gets the house in the divorce. I hope it's me because I feel entitled to it. We still need to divide all our property. I think it's best to sell everything we own together and split the proceeds. I'm being generous, considering she sided with my parents to try to cheat me out of my share of the money. She stopped trying to contact me, which is a relief. By now, she should understand that reconciliation isn't possible. I'm now focusing on my business plan, which I hope to start working on actively very soon. I'm done with the divorce, and things are finally looking up for me. I have a lot of work ahead to rebuild my life and learn how to live on my own. It's going to be a long journey, but I believe it will be worth it in the end.